Looking for a high-end ski vacation in Europe? Switzerland's Crans-Montana is one of the best around, averaging over 300 days of sunshine per year, and with lifts sponsored by Prada, L'Oreal, and other luxury brands, this vacation spot makes no effort to hide its moneyed roots. But what does the actual skiing and snowboarding look like, and is it possible to ski here without breaking the bank? Well, in this video, we'll go through Crans-Montana's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. If you find this information helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for crucial industry updates and other exclusive content you won't see in our videos. With that all being said, let's jump in. Let's start out with what might be Crans-Montana's most distinguishing physical attribute, its predisposition towards sunshine. More than 3/4 of Crans-Montana's days are sunny, which allows for incredible views of the surrounding mountains in and around the Rhone Valley. On clear days, it's possible to see many iconic mountains, including the Matterhorn and even Mont Blanc. Every part of the mountain is home to outstanding views of sheer rock cliffs, alpine meadows, dark pine forests below, jagged snow-capped peaks, deep long valleys, and everything in between. But all this sun comes with a downside. Crans-Montana is primarily south-facing, which results in perennial sunbake. As a result of these circumstances, the snow will typically turn to slush within a day or two of the last storm. This slush can refreeze into ice first thing in the morning, but thanks to the sun, the snow often does return to corn in lower elevations during the day. Crans-Montana regularly sees powder throughout the season. The snow is slightly on the wet and heavier side, and on the sun-exposed slopes, accumulation gets crusty after a few days without the fresh snow. Above 2,500 meters, the effects of the sun are minimized a bit, and snow retention is a lot better. The resort does occasionally see rain at lower elevations, but the areas above 1,700 meters do reliably receive snow. To complement the natural snowfall, the resort employs snowmaking on most of its trails, which helps ensure a resilient base even in the worst of conditions. It's also worth noting that when it does storm, Crans-Montana can face operational issues. Low visibility or strong winds can cause trail and lift closures. If weather conditions look to be acting up on the day of your visit, make sure to keep an eye on the status of the trails so you don't get stuck somewhere you don't want to. Crans-Montana is a decently sized resort for the Vail region of the Swiss Alps. With over 140 kilometers of slopes and 74 trails to choose from, skiers and riders will find themselves well covered with options. Crans-Montana has a 1,417 meter or 4,648 foot vertical drop, which is slightly above average for Europe. This full top to bottom vertical includes a sizable glacier at 3,000 meters. If this glacier isn't open, the vertical drop decreases to only 3,343 feet or approximately 1,000 meters. Another thing to note about Crans-Montana is its two-part name. Crans and Montana used to be two entirely separate villages that happened to share the same plateau, although they have since essentially sprawled into each other. The resort also eventually expanded eastward to span the town of Barzet as well. Because of these circumstances, Crans-Montana has three distinct base areas, each serving their own distinct mountain pod. The bases at Crans and Montana feed into the Cradiere mountain zone and by extension to the upper mountain Bella Louis area. The base at Barzet feeds into Les Violettes and by extension to Petit Mont Bonvin and Plaine Morte. In Crans, there is also a separate learning zone for kids on the snow-covered golf course. Crans-Montana used to have an additional base at a town even further east, Amanona. However, the out-of-base gondola here was removed about a decade ago, leaving the town with no lift service to the mountain. If you do decide to venture to Amanona, you'll have to take a free shuttle bus to get back to town. Crans-Montana has some great beginner terrain, although the quantity of runs that are rated at this level is somewhat limited. Blue-rated beginner pistes span a range of elevations, with runs ranging from wide-open cruisers to scenic below tree-lined paths. However, runs of this rating only exist in a few mountain areas, most notably Petit Mont Bonvin, Cradiere, and Arnova. In some cases, there's no beginner way to get down to the bases without downloading a lift first. In addition, there's no marked easy way to get from one side of the resort to the other. We would say that a few red-rated pistes could be doable for beginners, with some runs, most notably Colorado or Bridget, offering alternatives for beginners to use to avoid the steep parts. However, guests will really want to confer with locals or an instructor to check which runs are suitable to their ability level. For true first-timers, there are also two bunny hills with magic carpets and poma lifts, one at Arnova and one on the golf course. Once you reach intermediate proficiency, you'll have unlocked the bulk of the terrain at Crans-Montana. Ranging from long tree-defined runs to swaths of high alpine, the resort seemingly has it all for guests of this ability level. In fact, with perhaps the exception of the glacier and a few upper mountain chairs at the far east of the resort, there really isn't any mountain area that doesn't have very solid intermediate trails. Most of these red-rated runs are groomed almost every night, making them perfect for those who love fresh corduroy. Crans-Montana's terrain park setups are extremely competitive, perhaps only second best in Switzerland's deluxe. There are parks with boxes, rails, and jumps ranging from extra small to extra large throughout the resort. The parks ranging from extra small to medium can be lapped with the Marignu Poma lift, while the large and extra large parks can be lapped by a Poma lift that's aptly named Snow Park. While it's not the best resort in the world for thrill seekers, Crans-Montana still boasts some really solid advanced and expert terrain if you know where to look. For experienced skiers and riders, the resort boasts a number of challenges, including steep runs used for slalom and downhill racing, mogul trails, and off-piste steeps, chutes, and cliffs. In lower mountain areas, there are even some glades, but if you care about your equipment, these should really only be attempted during a deep powder day. If you're not feeling the trees, you'll want to head to the higher reaches of the eastern end of the resort for the hardest terrain, with some demanding black and yellow runs. The top half of the Tula chair provides experts some steep moguls on the Les Bosses piste if it hasn't snowed in a while, while the other yellow trails around the resort are rarely groomed either. If you want to test your endurance, the glacier at Plaine Morte is the place to be. The prolonged Kandahar Black Piste is the longest trail at the resort, and while the official run itself is groomed, the areas immediately adjacent to the run are often skied and get bumped up, making for some seriously leg-burning turns. Despite not being marked pistes, these just out of bounds lines are somewhat avalanche patrolled, as their conditions can impact the groomed piste below. This makes them slightly safer than true off-piste, but avalanches aren't completely out of the question, so when you're there, be sure to use your best judgment. Speaking of true off-piste, Crans-Montana has lots of lift access backcountry lines that can be fun to do, but we only recommend doing these with proper avalanche gear and an experienced guide. Within the mid and upper mountain areas of the resort, there are some extremely steep, rock-riddled couloirs in a couple places, including at the skiers left of the entrance to the Bobby Rambaldi piste, to the skiers right of the Tula chair, just below the Zabona T-bar, and directly under the Lassat chair. There are somehow even more dangerous chutes under the Violet Express gondola, which are barely large enough for a man to fit in. If you don't mind either boot packing or skinning, then you'll likely be able to unlock even more extreme terrain. The Les Faverges sector is the place to be, easily accessed by cutting to the skiers left while on the Kandahar piste. It is a massive hidden valley with outstanding views, eventually leading back to Amanona village. But beware, as with most of Europe, all of Crans-Montana's off-piste is not formally avalanche secured, and bringing proper avalanche gear is strongly recommended. If you're unfamiliar with this type of terrain, you should really hire a guide. Within the bounds of Crans-Montana itself, it's easy enough to find your way around. The resort has several distinct mountain pods, and while getting between them can be confusing at times if you don't know the route, the signs can be pretty helpful in this regard. The resort's markings indicate where in the resort you are, but they typically direct you to different general pods within the resort rather than named ski runs. But while your first day or two may not be the easiest, once you know where and what all the mid-mountain locations are, it's pretty straightforward to find your way around. One nice feature is that at most lifts, there are wall-mounted live trail maps. Importantly, since some of Crans-Montana's mountain areas can close due to inclement weather conditions, these maps show whether some of the major crossover points are open or not. One nice feature about Crans-Montana is that it runs night skiing. Operations happen on select days from Christmas until the end of the season. The night skiing footprint is only a beginner slope, but if you want to get out to the slopes after hours, it can still be a very enjoyable experience for skiers and riders of other ability levels. Crans-Montana's on-mountain experience is aided by a strong lift system. All of the resort's aerial lifts are high speed, with a mix of detachable quads, six-packs, gondolas, and funitels. Although there are a number of surface lifts, they aren't especially long and can generally be avoided if one wants to. All of the gondolas and funitels are two-way with mid-stations, which allows visitors, especially beginners, to easily skip parts of the runs if they wish. It is possible to ski from the top of any mountain zone to one of the bases, although if you want to end up at a specific base, your day might take a bit more planning. If you end up at the Barzetts base or any point of the resort west of it, it takes some work to get to the bases in Cranes and Montana. This is because the National chairlift provides the only way to cross from Les Violettes to Cradière, making it extremely overworked. Also, in low snow years, the Tonosy slope connecting Cabane de Bois to Marolier can close, forcing everyone coming from Plaine Morte and Amanona to take the Cabane de Bois 6-pack to get back to western resort areas. Perhaps the biggest missing link in Cranes Montana's lift network is the lack of lift service out of Amanona Village. This missing lift means the lowest elevation trails in the easternmost part of the resort have no direct lift service, and it makes it a significant slog to get to the nearest lift from the trails directly above it. There are plans to build a gondola from Amanona Village to Petit Mont-Bonvin in the next few years. When this is finally complete, it should make the easternmost reaches of the mountain much more appealing. But with the exception of the aforementioned choke points, Cranes Montana doesn't see many crowds apart from the highest of peak times. Apart from the December holiday period, mid-February, and Easter, lift lines are essentially non-existent. It's even possible for it to be a Saturday Bluebird powder day and to find yourself as seemingly the only person on the mountain. Cranes Montana frequenters don't tend to ski when the visibility isn't clear, so even during peak times, the mountain will be virtually empty if it's not sunny. Even at the resort's worst, it's extremely unlikely you'll see lines of greater than 15 minutes at any place at the resort. Cranes Montana does have a fast track option if you decide you want to skip the lines, but given the modest crowds, there's very little reason to purchase it. Although lift lines are rarely an issue, trail congestion does sometimes happen. Most people hit the mountain from 9 to 12, so if you ski or ride in the afternoon, you're trading slightly worse conditions for less people. Besides perhaps its views, Cranes Montana's greatest strength is its on-mountain facility setup. The quantity and quality of the lodges on the mountain are nothing short of extraordinary. There are a total of 21 on-mountain restaurants, ranging from grab-and-go buffets to cozy mountain huts, all the way to fancy sit-down restaurants owned by Michelin star chefs. All of the lodges have both indoor and outdoor seating, with live music widely available as well. For the 2024-25 season, Cranes Montana is probably on the radar for a lot of Americans for the first time. This is because the resort is going through a substantial ownership change. The mountain has been purchased by Vail Resorts, marking the massive ski resort company's second endeavor into the European ski market following its acquisition of Andermatt-Sedrun in 2022. It's unclear if or how Vail's purchase of Cranes Montana will affect the overall mountain experience, but one major change is in store for next season: the resort's inclusion on the Epic Pass. Cranes Montana is now an unlimited mountain on the full Epic Pass and a 5-day member of the Epic Local Pass, making the ski area an easy choice for those who already have one of those pass products. Importantly, Cranes Montana is one of only 2 European resorts to be on the Epic Local Pass, setting it apart from destinations such as Les Trois Vallées and Ski Rama Dolomiti that are included on the full Epic Pass only. Cranes Montana is easily accessed by both road and train. When traveling to Cranes Montana, the vast majority of guests will go through the valley floor city of Sierre. There is a funicular linking Montana to Sierre, but note that the funicular top station is in an out-of-the-way location, and because of this, we recommend that you use the free and reliable bus service to access the funicular from anywhere within the village. If you also want, there are some buses directly from Sierre that drop you off in more convenient locations. Sierre is 1.5 hours from Geneva by train and 2 hours by car or shuttle. Apart from Geneva, the closest major airports are Zurich and Milan. It's important to note that if you plan to drive to Cranes Montana, in order to use the Swiss highway system, you need to purchase a special vignette. If you've rented your car within Switzerland, this vignette is already installed, but if not, this can be bought at any international border checkpoint. If you plan to drive directly up to Cranes Montana, prepare to pay for parking. The prices aren't the worst, at 2 francs per hour, but it's annoying that there aren't any free options. It's worth noting that only the Cranes base has above ground parking. If you don't need to park directly at the ski lifts, there is underground parking all throughout the villages, which can be accessed either by walking through the resort itself or by using the free public bus system. Despite its upscale bona fides, Cranes Montana is home to a range of lodging options, ranging from economical all the way to ultra luxury. Guests also have the unique option to stay directly on the mountain at either Chet-Saron or Cabane de Violettes, where transportation is exclusively provided by Snowcat taxis. For those visiting on a budget, the youth hostel Cranes Montana offers shared room accommodations within walking distance or a short bus ride from the Cranes and Montana bases. Another great aspect of the Crans-Montana experience is its Après-Ski. There are many options, both on and off the mountain, and in both villages. Each base has live music every night and can be heard basically anywhere within the villages. The resort's ritzy towns boast an array of cozy bars, restaurants, and boutiques, creating a lively atmosphere after a day on the slopes. Crans in Montana may not be quite as distinctive as some other Swiss and Austrian resort towns, but they're still pretty great. Crans-Montana has long been a go-to mountain for the ultra-wealthy. Even though the village isn't quite as moneyed as Swiss resorts such as St. Moritz and Verbier, they still get a fair share of attention from high-end clientele. Crans' Rue de Prado is probably the best manifestation of this vibe, with its fair share of Louis Vuitton, Prada, and Hermes stores. On the other hand, the Montana side appeals to those looking for a more laid-back local atmosphere, although it's still on the more upscale side. So Crans-Montana isn't a perfect mountain, and it's slightly on the smaller side compared to other European mega resorts. However, the never-ending views, top-tier facilities, and generally strong lift infrastructure make the resort well worth a stop for those who value a high-end, easygoing ski vacation. Crans-Montana's lift tickets are on the pricier side compared to other Swiss resorts, but in comparison to North America, Crans-Montana is one of the best values you can get. With prices maxing out at only 89 Swiss francs, or just over $100 at the time of this recording, the resort is an absolute steal compared to what you get with a lift ticket in the United States. Crans-Montana is now on the Epic Pass, but if you don't plan on skiing in North America this winter, it's probably not even worth buying. We do have to note that the lift tickets and Epic Pass products do not include the funicular to Sierre or any ski patrol services. These transportation tickets and insurance riders do have to be bought separately. Now let's go through how Crans-Montana stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Crans-Montana sees about 500 centimeters or 200 inches of accumulation each year, which is typical for the Alps, and the resort gets a 6 for snow. Crans-Montana has a fairly robust snowmaking system, but south-facing slopes hurt snow retention somewhat, and operations can be seriously impacted by inclement weather conditions, getting the resort a 5 for resiliency. Crans-Montana has 140 kilometers of maintained ski slopes and spans just over 3,000 acres from boundary to boundary, earning the resort an 8 for size. Crans-Montana offers distinct trails across a range of elevations, but it's mostly geared towards intermediates, and the resort gets a 5 for terrain diversity. While there are some mogul runs and daunting off-piste lines if you know where to look, Crans-Montana is not the best resort for thrill seekers, and it gets a 6 for challenge. Crans-Montana has a thoroughly modern lift setup with only a few surface lifts serving minor areas, and the resort gets a 9 for lifts. Despite a handful of choke points, Crans-Montana rarely sees serious lift lines overall, and the resort gets a 7 for crowd flow. Crans-Montana's upscale bona fides show up in its on-mountain facilities, and the resort might have the highest density of on-mountain restaurants of any ski resort we've ever visited, earning the resort our highest score of 10 for facilities. Crans-Montana doesn't suffer from the same truly horrendous navigational issues as some other European resorts, but the resort does have a somewhat confusing and traverse-intensive layout when it comes to getting between mountain pods, getting it a 4 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Crans-Montana is one of the most beautiful ski resorts in Switzerland, with skies that are often clear and direct views of some of the most iconic peaks in Europe. The resort isn't quite as one-of-a-kind as places like Zermatt or Chamonix, but it still gets an impressive score of 9 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 69 as of mid-2024. Crans-Montana may not have the largest footprint or most diverse terrain in Switzerland, but for those looking for a high-end vacation and stunning views, it makes for a very compelling choice. The resort falls somewhat short of the more reliable slopes of Les Trois-Vallées and Verbier, but it really stands out for its incredible restaurants while still managing to offer slightly more interesting terrain than Zermatt. Crans-Montana won't be perfect for everyone, but it's carved a really interesting niche for itself that warrants checking out when you book a trip to the region, especially if you have an Epic Pass. For more information on over 100 destination ski resorts around the world, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.